So sometime last month, while I was going through a depressive episode, I got to thinking about all the books that made me cry. Yes, I'm that girl. I'm that girl that thinks of even more reasons to cry when I'm already feeling mopey. I don't know what to say. But anyway, I was thinking of the books, the OG books that one made me cry. Two, I know that every single time I go back and reread them, I would still bawl my eyes out. You know those books, the books that make you feel such intense emotions and you just can't help it. You start crying. Yeah, I was tabulating my list and I just thought, hey, I can totally put this in a video because this is the kind of content you all signed up for, to be mopey as shit with me. Hello everybody, Nora back again. So I will start with the very first book that made me cry, because don't worry, there'll be 7 books in total for this video. And the first of them is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. What can I say? I don't think there's anybody that has legitimately read this book that has not felt some form of intense emotion. Some people really, really love it. I belong to that category / that camp. And then there are some people that really hate it. But this is not a book that you would ever feel ambivalent towards. You would definitely feel something, some sort of emotion, even if it's just annoyance. But other than really, really enjoying it, this book also made me cry so hard. There is nothing like following the story of a young woman who was ambitious, born into desperate times, and decided that for her to rise to the top, there are decisions she has to make, there are alliances she has to build. Even if it is that she feels that the whole world is using her, ultimately it is all to help her to the rise to the top. And I was rooting for Evelyn, but eventually it got to the point where I was there is so much she dealt with. I don't want to go into further details because I don't want to spoil it. But there's something about following the rise / trajectory of someone's existence and looking at all the mistakes they made and all the decisions they took and all the great loves and the great losses and the misses that they've experienced, that just makes you realize just how, one, frail life is, and two, how it is that opportunities and moments and great loves are just very fleeting, and you have to be there, always ready, ever present in that moment to grab onto it before it's gone, sifting through your fingers like smoke. And there's just that entire message just kind of made me very, very weepy, along with the sad bits, because there were the sad bits and emotional bits with telling her life story that just broke me and then reconstructed me and broke me again. Like, this book broke me over and over until I finished it, and it's a book that haunted me, and my eyes definitely told a very big story of that loss. So yeah, the next book that had me wailing, like literally wailing, was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix by J.K. Rowling. This is the 5th book in the series. I'm not going to go into that much details because I think practically everybody has read Harry Potter at this point. And if you have not read it, this is just like getting into a somewhat final stretch of the book. Not final, but like it's the 5th book in a 7-book series. If anything I say at this point is definitely going to be spoilers, so if you've not read it, I'm not going to go into details, but let's just say that this was the book, this was the one Harry Potter book. Like, there was a death that occurred at the end of Goblet of Fire that let me know that, okay, yes, things were definitely, this is not the Harry Potter of 3 books ago. Things have gotten serious. But even with, God, I can't believe I just said that. God damn. Okay, but even with that, the loss was still not as heartbreaking as the loss that Harry and us, the reader, experienced in this book. Like, this was the first Harry Potter book where I started crying. This was like the start of the Tears Fest, because I cried some more in Half-Blood Prince and I definitely cried in Deathly Hallows. But the loss in Order of the Phoenix, the way it hit, the way it punched through every single sinew, every thought I had, every form of joy and hope I had experienced leading up to that point, it was just devastating. Being in Harry's head and experiencing that loss, and considering the fact that the loss was as personal to us as it was to him, like, I was crying. I was legitimately crying in that moment. Harry's silent screams were mine. His confusion, his rage, his grief was mine as well. And I was... The 15, 16-year-old Noria that read this book, that broke down because of this book, is not so different from the present day Noria, who still reread this book this year and was still bawling my eyes out again. There was just something about a child experiencing for the very first time true grief, a true loss of somebody that has meant the world to them. And yes, I know we can say that, oh, Ari had already lost his parents leading to this point, but there's a difference between a parent you barely remember, just you just feel the loss aching in your soul, and this visceral ripping out of your heart to shreds. That was what Harry experienced in this book, and by extension we all did along with him. So like, find me someone who read Order of the Phoenix, especially the end of it, and was not crying, and I will find you someone who most likely has their heart made of stone. Or even if their heart is not made of stone, I'm just like, teach me your ways. But at the same time, I like being able to cry. I love experiencing pathos. I love being able to connect with characters and bawl that much. So I definitely am not going to trade this depth of feeling in my heart for anything else in the world. So yeah, I just can't. I just won't. The next book that had me bawling my eyes out, Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a book that follows the events of the Nigerian Biafran War, told through fictional characters, but the experiences that they had, the feeling of loss, of desolation, the constantly living under the threat of violence, the fact that there are still people with relatives who were missing during the war, and this war ended in 1970 to be precise, and these relatives still haven't been found. It's going to be 50 years next year. So the funniest about it is that a lot of Nigerian history, especially with regards to the Biafran War, is not told because there was such a gross violation of human rights, of human dignity, of our own humanity, a corruption of our own humanity that we as a country like to sweep under the rug. And then you have this book with these fictional characters that we got to know and love before the war hit, and then we see just how destructive and how much war constantly takes. Even when you think it's over, even when you think you found peace, it still continues to take that aching, gaping hole that is never quite filled. The amount of raw hurt that there's a group of people in Nigeria who still experience today never fails to break me, never fails to wreck me. So yeah, I was bawling my eyes out when I read this book. The minute the war started, I knew I was in for a ride, and boy was I in for a ride. Because Chimamanda has this amazing ability of putting you straight into a character's heads. And you're primarily in the heads of a woman going through, experiencing a war, slowly losing everything and everyone and every belief in a society, in a system that would help her. She loses everything. And it's heartbreaking. So yeah, the first time I read this book, I cried. The second time I read this book, I cried some more. I still cry every time I read this book. And if you've watched the movie is sad, but this book is heartbreaking. Especially because, I repeat, a lot of these situations, a lot of these terrors, a lot of this brutality was real. And that makes it even more heartbreaking. The next book that made me cry was The Score by Elle Kennedy. And I know if you've read the book, you'll be like, but Nori, I don't understand. The score was pretty happy most of the time. It was very smutty. Like, what on earth would make you cry about that book? It's the later part of the book in which one of the main characters experiences loss. And by this, I mean the death of a friend. And he grieves that loss. And I remember getting to that, the minute we were told about the death, I had to close my Audible app because I was listening to it on audio. I had to close the app and I just started bawling. Because see, when I was in university, I lost a friend from secondary school, which you all probably know as high school. Most of you all know as high school. I lost a friend when I was in uni, when we were both in uni. She was traveling, she was on a trip. It was a freak road accident, and she was the only one that died. And there's just something about losing someone who is exactly your age mate, who, whose life has always been ahead of them. You had plans. You were thinking, oh, I've not spoken to this person recently, I'm going to speak to them next week. We're going to hang out eventually. You're thinking about graduation. You're thinking about writing your thesis. You're thinking about an upcoming test. You're experiencing practically the same thought process because you're both in a system. We were in different universities, yes, but we're both university students and thinking about graduation and thinking about what happens after graduation, and then to realize that there's somebody, someone you grew up with, someone you're such close friends with, who does not get that continuation of their story. It's heartbreaking. And running into that in the book, I never expected to experience that. It made me love the book even more, but two, it absolutely devastated me. And I cried because, once again, I was that 19-year-old girl hearing that news and just feeling my heart break. I cried because my heartbreak was still small in comparison to what her family was going through and the loss they were experiencing. It's so hard not to cry thinking about it. But yeah, it was heartbreaking. The next book that made me cry was Steadfast by Sarina Bowen. And the reason being that I've read some books about addicts. I've read some books that feature addicts as main characters. But I don't think I've read any book that quite does it, that quite did it the way Sarina Bowen did in Steadfast. We were legitimately in Jude's head. Every experience he had, every emotion he was feeling, everything he was going through, we felt as intensely as he was feeling it. And there is nothing like being in the head of somebody who has literally hit rock bottom, whose life has shattered all around him and is trying to build it up whilst dealing with addiction, whilst still grieving, and also whilst still dealing with people who would not let him forget his mistakes or let go of them. There's something about being in that head when things were so drab and yet there were spots of light, but it was just so intense. And I spent all that moment, every moment of it, crying. Every moment of it crying. I think Steadfast is definitely going to be one of my absolute favorite, best Sarina Bowen books, because that book was so real. And that book left me in tears and in shambles. And that book also left me with an even higher respect. And the respect and regard has always been high, but an even higher one for addicts, because it's a struggle. Every day is a struggle not to slip. Every day is a struggle not to give in to the voices, not to give in to the doubts, not to let people's opinions of exactly who you are, their perceptions of you not being more than your mistake. It's a struggle to ensure that does not stand. It's a struggle to ensure that they are not proven right. And reading that book just broke me. And I found myself bawling my eyes out. I'm still tearing up. I still go about my day and then I think of Jude and I start crying all over again, because that book was beautiful but also so sad, but also so joyous. It was in itself a contradiction. That was definitely a reason why I love it and why I would always love it, but definitely a reason why it made me cry. The next book that made me cry, Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. I know if you're not a Sarah J. Maas fan, you're probably rolling your eyes and being like, seriously, Nora? But yes, I'm like, most of this book was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, I was okay with a lot of this book. The ending, the last stretch of this book though, the last about 50 to 70 pages, it was just me crying from the very start to the very end of this book. I was shattered. I'm not going to go into details because, once again, this is like book 5, technically book 6 if you count the collection of novellas, but this is like book 5, official, like the 5th novel in this series. So I don't want to go into details because that would definitely be spoiling things, but everything that Aileen experienced in the last 50 to 70 pages of this book broke me. I did a reading vlog when I was, because I binge read this entire series in a week. I was reading like basically a book a day. And I remember in my reading vlog, the next morning when I was talking about this book, like my face was swollen, my eyes were like red. I looked like I'd been dragged to the depths of hell and back again. And that was how I felt, because I repeat, Empire of Storms was so fucking sad, especially the end. I still haven't recovered. I don't know if I would ever be able to recover, because I know I'm definitely going to reread the series, and I'm prepping myself because I know I'm going to cry all over again, because I repeat, the last 70 pages of this book, seeing such a strong character being broken in such a vicious manner, and then you realize the layers to which she's built, the level of love she has for her people, for her friends. And the fact that ultimately, every single book in this series has been building up to when we meet the gods and that conversation happens and you realize exactly what's to happen. Like, you're hit with that bit of sadness, and then what comes after, like you're just like, can my girl just get a break? But she doesn't. So yeah, I cried. Like, I cried a bit in Kingdom of Ash. There was this tremendous sacrifice in Kingdom of Ash. Like, that scene, God, if you love this series, if you love the Throne of Glass series, I don't think there's anybody that will read that scene in Kingdom of Ash and not cry, because that was very sad. But this book, like, that was a scene, actually 2 scenes if I'm being honest. But this book, the last 70 pages was just a constant tear, like, cry galore for me. I cried so hard, and I cried so much. And then finally, the last book that made me cry is from the comic book Sandman by Neil Gaiman, which you all know is my absolute favorite, absolute best comic book ever. Like, ever. And it's from the issue The Kindly Ones, which I'm going to go into spoiler territory, because yeah, kind of. So I'm just going to put somewhere at the bottom here, if you want to read Sandman, but you absolutely don't want to be spoiled, because trust me, this is a very big spoiler. So if you still plan on reading Sandman, and you don't want to be spoiled, please look here. If you don't plan on reading Sandman, which you should totally, because that comic is just fantastic, and Netflix is going to be turning it into a TV show, and your girl is fucking excited, because I repeat, it's one of my favorite comics ever. But I'll just put the time link here, so just skip to that point, if you are trying to avoid spoilers. But at the end of The Kindly Ones, Morpheus dies, and there's the build up to his death and how hard he tries to avoid it. It's like a Greek tragedy. It's once again things set in motion, and you see the death coming, and you're holding your breath and keeping your fingers crossed and praying that no, it does not happen. But then it does. For miscommunication and misunderstanding, and partly part of his hubris, because of how he handled things with Hippolyta. Like, it was just a build-up of different things that could individually might have prevented his death, but together made his death inevitable. Like I said, just like a Greek tragedy. And this was a character you didn't really love at the start, but at the end, I was bawling my eyes out at that loss, because it was so fucking painful. And then we segue into the next issue, The Wake, where everybody pays their respects, where we slowly see the people he's had unfinished business with appear in the comics in the final farewell to this amazing, larger than life, literally larger than life, because it's Morpheus's. The farewell. The Wake was a farewell from his siblings to his friends, to acquaintances, to the child that would take his place, as the Lord of the Realms of Dreams. It was just heartbreaking. It was really, really sad. I can't stop crying. I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah. So the last book that made me cry, Sandman by Neil Gaiman. To be precise, is issues The Kindly Ones and the Weak. Sad. So fucking sad. But yeah, those are some of the books that made me cry. Some made me cry years ago and are still making me cry till today. Some are more recent discoveries that I know every single time I reread them would always make me cry. But like I said, I enjoy the pathos. Like I said, I take joy in the fact that I connect so deeply with these characters that their death and the losses they experience can affect me in such a huge, monumental way. So, yeah, that's this slightly sad, slightly mopey video. And also kind of a recommendation, because trust me, each of those books that I mentioned, I would always recommend them. Like, highly. Because it's a really, really precious thing when a book can bring that amount, that level of emotion from a person. At least that's what I believe. But yeah, that's the end of the video. If you liked it, please do not forget to give it a big thumbs up. Check out my other videos. Subscribe if you want to. I make new videos every Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I'll see you soon. Until then, stay passionate, love books, love yourself. Bye.